Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the locked doors of a mental hospital? These aren't just tales for the faint of heart. These are chilling, real-life accounts from psychiatric nurses who've seen things that defy logic and explanation. Get ready for 5 spine-tingling mental hospital horror stories that will haunt your thoughts long after the screen fades to black. There's a certain stillness you expect in a psychiatric ward. At least, that's what you think before you've lived through the weight of what actually happens. You expect noise, outbursts, the chaos of fragile minds. But no one warns you about the quiet, the heavy, eerie quiet, the kind that makes your skin crawl. That's what it was like with Olivia. She had been with us for months, nonverbal, completely shut off from the world. Out of all the patients I had worked with, she remained the most enigmatic. Her file was long, marked by trauma and institutional transfers. But the real story behind her silence, we never knew. She never spoke, never responded. Not to voices, questions, commands. Nothing. Yet there was something almost too calm about her. Unsettling. Most days, Olivia sat in the same chair, staring blankly at a wall. Her pale, unblinking eyes seemed fixed on something none of us could see. We got used to her presence. In that way staff sometimes do with long-term patients. She asked for nothing, and we expected nothing in return. She was simply there until one night, everything changed. It was a Tuesday evening, nothing remarkable. I was finishing my rounds and came to her room like always. The halls were quiet. A few patients were already asleep. Some were murmuring to themselves, lost in their routines. Olivia's door was open. I stepped in, expecting the same silent figure. At first glance, she looked asleep, eyes closed, body still. But something felt off. The air in the room had a weight to it. Then I noticed her lips moving. I stopped in the doorway, frozen. She'd never spoken before. Not once. Yet now, she was whispering, words I couldn't make out. I stepped closer, cautiously. My heart pounded. What was she saying? And why now? I leaned in just slightly, trying to catch the words. That's when I heard it. But it wasn't Olivia's voice. It was deeper, raspy, ancient-sounding, like it didn't belong to her body. The words were broken, strange, like they were being channeled from somewhere else entirely. "Tick-tock," the voice rasped. "The time for you is almost up." My blood ran cold. I stepped back, breath caught in my throat. What was I hearing? Was it a hallucination? A side effect of medication? Then Olivia opened her eyes and stared directly at me. Not past me, at me. Her gaze was sharp, focused. Nothing like the blank look I'd grown used to. And in that same voice, low and unfamiliar, she said, "I know, the end is near, for you and for him." I stood frozen, unable to speak. Him? I thought, was she referring to someone else? A fellow nurse? A patient? Then her lips moved again. Tomorrow, the phone call. It will change everything. And just like that, she went silent again. Her eyes closed. Her body relaxed, almost peacefully. It was like the moment had never happened. But I knew it had. I left the room shaking. Maybe it was nothing. Nurses hear strange things all the time. I tried to convince myself it was just a fluke, a weird moment. But the words echoed in my mind all night. Tick-tock, the time for you is almost up. Tomorrow, the phone call. The next day went by quietly, mostly. I tried to push the incident aside, chalking it up to fatigue or imagination. But deep down I was waiting, watching the clock. And then it happened. The phone rang. I recognized the number instantly, and dread sank into my chest. It was the call I had been fearing for months. My mother had been battling cancer, and I had been preparing for this moment, telling myself I'd be ready. But I wasn't. No one ever is. The voice on the other end confirmed it. She was gone. The pain was immediate and crushing. And amid the grief, I remembered Olivia's words from the night before. She knew. She had said it would happen, that the call would come. And it did. Days passed, and the memory stayed with me, lingering like a shadow. But the strangest part wasn't over yet. A few weeks later, during a late shift change, another nurse, Jenna, approached me, looking visibly shaken. "Olivia spoke to me last night," she said, eyes wide. "I didn't know what to say. She told me things," Jenna continued, voice trembling, "things no one could know." I asked what she meant. She said, "The child will be lost. You'll have to say goodbye before the end of the year." I didn't understand at first, until Jenna explained. "My sister's pregnant," she said, "and she just found out something's wrong. The doctors aren't sure the baby will survive." Her face went pale. She was holding back tears. And I realized in that moment, I wasn't alone in what I'd experienced. Olivia had said something equally cryptic to someone else. Something that struck just as deep. We still don't know how she knew. Olivia never spoke again after that. Her silence returned, and with it, the eerie calm she was known for. But every time I pass her room now, I remember what she said. Tick-tock. Somehow, some way, she knew, and that knowing still chills me more than anything else I've ever seen inside those walls. The dread didn't fade. In fact, it only grew. Because just like me, others were getting caught in Olivia's strange web of eerie predictions. It started subtly at first. Odd little comments. Unsettling phrases. Olivia, the woman who had once been completely silent, was suddenly speaking with a voice that didn't feel like her own. But the things she said, they started happening. Events that hadn't occurred yet. Names she shouldn't have known. Details that no one ever told her. At first, we dismissed them. Coincidences, maybe. Our minds playing tricks on us. After all, working long hours in a psychiatric facility can wear on you. But then the predictions started getting more specific. Things only we, the nurses, could understand. She mentioned exact dates. Phone calls. Illnesses. Events that hadn't happened. But would days or even hours later. And the way she spoke, sometimes in riddles, other times with haunting clarity. Each time she did, something inside us tightened. A quiet panic, slowly spreading. The kind of fear you don't speak about out loud, because doing so might make it real. More and more of us began to notice it. Olivia wasn't just speaking. She was prophesying. And the worst part? She was always right. There was no logical explanation for it. How could a woman who had spent months in silence suddenly seem to know things about people she'd never interacted with? We searched her file again and again. No record of religious delusions. No history of predictive behavior. Nothing that could explain the shift. But something had changed in her. Or maybe something had awakened. Weeks passed, and Olivia's cryptic statements became routine. We started writing them down, comparing notes. Some were obvious warnings, while others were so vague they didn't make sense, until they came true. One nurse had a miscarriage. Olivia had whispered the word goodbye to her just the day before. Another had a car accident. Olivia had mentioned brakes failing earlier that week. It was impossible to ignore. And even now, as I sit here writing this, I still hear her voice echo in the back of my mind. Tick-tock. The time for you is almost up. I don't know what Olivia was, or what power she tapped into. But when she spoke, we listened, because something about her voice, about her words, felt like they came from somewhere else. Maybe she wasn't just speaking to us. Maybe she was speaking through us, or even from beyond. Hello, friends. Thanks so much for watching. A huge shout out to all of our amazing subscribers. You're the reason these eerie stories continue to live on. But here's something wild. Only about 30% of our viewers are subscribed. If you enjoy these chilling tales, consider hitting that subscribe button. It takes just a second, but it means the world to us. And if you're feeling brave, like and share this video to keep the horror coming. You made this possible. We'll see you in the next one. If you dare. It started out like any other day. The hospital was running like clockwork. Nurses moving from room to room. Doctors making their rounds. Machines humming in steady rhythm. In a place like this, routine is survival. Predictability is comfort. Everyone knows their role. But sometimes something cracks through the familiar, and that's when things started to change. It began with whispers. Faint, easily dismissed at first. Someone said they saw a nurse where she shouldn't be. Nothing dramatic, just odd. She looks just like Eunice, someone said. No way. Eunice is in the break room, someone else replied. It was brushed off as confusion. Hospitals are busy. People move fast. You see someone in passing and assume it's who you think. But the comments didn't stop. One morning during rounds, a night shift nurse claimed she'd seen Eunice on the second floor, talking to a patient by the elevator. Problem was, Eunice had been on the third floor the entire time, accounted for, working with her assigned patients. I swear I saw her, the nurse said, visibly shaken. I thought maybe she was on break. But Eunice wasn't on break. She was where she always was. The nurse had been alone. The sightings kept coming. Doctors and staff reported seeing Eunice in places she couldn't possibly be. The basement, the stairwell, even on security footage, where she'd appear walking down a hallway and then vanish before the camera finished its rotation. At first, I thought it was just stress-induced paranoia. A coincidence, maybe, but then I saw her. It was late one night. I was finishing up my charting when I looked down the hall and saw her, shoulders squared, head slightly tilted, scanning a clipboard. She looked exactly like Eunice. Same build, same hairstyle, same uniform. Eunice? I called out. She looked up and smiled. Her expression was soft, familiar, but something about it felt wrong. Just checking in, she said, and turned, walking silently down the corridor. But when I returned to the nurse's station moments later, there was Eunice, sitting at her desk, talking to a patient's family member. She had never left. That was the moment the joke stopped being funny. I talked to the head nurse about it. She shrugged it off. Stress, fatigue. It happens. People see things. But nurses don't just see things. We know where our colleagues are. We're trained to track people because lives depend on it. And Eunice had seen her first. It's like she was following me, she said one day, her hands trembling. I turned the corner, and there she was, just watching me. She looked exactly like me. No one else had seen the doppelganger that night. But after that, we couldn't unsee it. There was a shift in the air. You could feel it, like static before a storm. Staff grew tense. Conversations were quieter. People started walking a little faster through the halls, avoiding certain corners. Still, the sightings didn't stop. The double would appear suddenly and vanish just as fast. Sometimes in crowded areas. Sometimes in complete silence. No one ever saw her speak again after that one brief moment with me. She would smile, watch, then disappear. It got to the point where even the most skeptical among us, those who dismissed ghost stories and superstition, started carrying small crosses, wearing prayer beads, avoiding elevators late at night. The weirdest part? We never found her. No records. No extra staff. No one who looked remotely like Eunice had ever been hired. Security swept the hospital. Nothing. No evidence. No explanation. And yet we all knew what we saw. I don't know what she was. A ghost? A shadow of something forgotten? A fractured version of Eunice from another timeline? I can't say. But I do know this. She's still here. Somewhere in those halls. Waiting. Watching. And every now and then someone new sees her. She always vanished before anyone could get close. Every time someone tried to follow her, poof, she was gone. No one could ever say where she went. And whenever Eunice was asked about it, she always looked genuinely shaken. How could that be me? She'd whisper, her voice trembling. I've been right here. I'm not in two places at once. And she wasn't lying. Even the patients saw her. At first, they seemed confused, but that confusion quickly turned into anxiety, and then fear. One elderly woman was especially disturbed. She swore that Nurse Eunice, the same nurse who had been helping her all week, came into her room in the middle of the night. Only, her voice didn't sound like Eunice's. It was familiar, but wrong. Off somehow. Raspy. Distant. Cold. The strangest part? Eunice hadn't been anywhere near that wing that night. As the days passed, the unease spread like a virus through the staff. No one said outright at first, but we all knew The doppelganger was showing up more often, always just out of reach, always gone by the time someone tried to approach. But her presence lingered, like the echo of a voice you weren't supposed to hear. I still don't know if what we saw was real. Was it a ghost? A shared hallucination? Something we all imagined? I can't say. But what I do know is that places like that, hospitals with long histories and quiet halls, carry things. Echoes. Shadows. Secrets. Sometimes in the quietest corners of your mind, you catch glimpses of things that don't make sense. Things that don't belong. You tell yourself it's just your imagination, just a fatigue. But deep down, you know better. And sometimes, even when you're sure you're in control, there are mysteries you'll never unravel. Some things, like that nurse with Eunice's face, will always stay just out of reach. Maybe we were never meant to understand her. Hey, if you made it this far, you're braver than most. But this story, it's not over. The shadows are still whispering. And trust me, the truth is buried much deeper than you think. Stop now, and you might miss what's lurking in the next click. So go ahead, watch the next story. Before it watches you, the hospital was quiet. It was the middle of the night, the time when most of the world outside seemed to dissolve, and everything inside was wrapped in an eerie stillness. Machines hummed softly, fluorescent lights flickered in a steady rhythm, and the occasional shuffle of feet echoed down empty hallways. For those of us working the night shift, this was normal, routine. But Jacob was not normal. He'd been with us for a while, a silent presence, a man who barely spoke, barely moved, barely seemed alive some days, always seated in the same corner by the window, staring out at the distant glow of the streetlights. He wasn't violent or disruptive, just quiet, shut off, like someone had flipped a switch inside him long ago and never flipped it back. Therapy hadn't helped. Medication hadn't helped. Nothing we did made a dent in that silence. But we kept trying, because that's what we do. I don't know why, but I'd grown protective of him. There was a fragile air about Jacob, like a bird that had fallen from the sky and broken both wings. Something in him called out, not for help, exactly, but for care. And then, one night, everything changed. It was just after 3 a.m. I remember the time clearly because I was halfway through my rounds. The halls were empty. Most of the patients were asleep. The staff were either tucked into break rooms or finishing paperwork. Everything was still until I reached Jacob's room. The door was slightly ajar. That alone gave me pause. Jacob never touched the door. And inside, the light was flickering, casting long, strange shadows on the floor. I stepped in quietly, expecting to see him asleep like always. But he wasn't. He was laughing. At first, it was soft, a low, strange chuckle that sounded like it was being pushed out of him by something foreign. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't amused. It was off, disjointed, like a laugh trying to escape from a place it didn't belong. I froze. Jacob sat upright in bed, head tilted back, mouth open in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. And still, that laughter came. Hollow, cold, continuous. Jacob, I called, my voice cautious. He didn't look at me. He just kept laughing, louder now. His body trembled, as if he was being shaken from the inside out. But his eyes were locked on the far corner of the room. I followed his gaze, expecting to see something. Anything. There was nothing there. Jacob. I said again, stepping closer. What's going on? Still, he didn't move his eyes, didn't acknowledge me, and then he spoke. The words were quiet, so quiet I had to lean in to hear them. But once I did, they were impossible to forget. He's standing right behind you. My blood ran cold. I turned instinctively, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. But the room was empty, just me and Jacob. Alone. I looked back at him, shaken. His laugh had stopped, but his face was twisted with a kind of glee, like he wanted me to feel that chill, like he knew I would. Who? I asked, voice tight. Who's behind me? He didn't answer. Instead, he started laughing again. Harder, louder, like something inside him found it all hilarious. But nothing was funny. Nothing had changed. Except that now, the room didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. The air grew heavy, thick, and I swear the temperature dropped. I backed out of the room slowly, eyes darting back and forth, trying to shake the feeling that something was just out of frame, waiting, and the laughter followed me out, echoing down the hall. I didn't sleep that morning. I couldn't. And even now, when I think about it, I don't know what unsettles me more, Jacob's laugh or the look in his eyes when he said those words. He's standing right behind you. Because in that moment, I believed him, and part of me still does. I repeated my question, my voice trembling. Please, tell me what you see. Who's behind me? For a long moment, Jacob didn't respond. The laughter that had filled the room just seconds earlier faded, but the tension remained etched on his face. His body was tight, his eyes wide, and then in a voice so low I could barely catch it, he whispered something that sent a chill straight through me. He's always here. He's always behind me. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to comfort him, to say something reassuring, anything to make it better. But the truth is, I was afraid too. Something about the way he said it. It didn't feel like a hallucination. It felt like he meant it. My mind raced. Was this a psychotic break? A reaction to medication? Or something else? Something I couldn't understand? But those words wouldn't stop echoing inside my head. He's always here. He's always behind me. I called for backup immediately. Within minutes, the attending doctor arrived, followed by 2 more nurses. They attempted to calm Jacob down, to assess him clinically, but no one could explain what was going on. The laughter eventually stopped, slowly, uneasily, but Jacob never stopped staring into the far corner of the room, as if something or someone was still there. He remained like that for the rest of the night. We kept him under close observation, but he didn't speak another word. Not that night, not the next, not ever again. In the days that followed, we tried everything. Therapy, medication adjustments, cognitive evaluations. But nothing reached him. Nothing worked. It was as though Jacob had locked himself away in silence, sealing himself off from the rest of us. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He didn't move much. He simply sat in that room, day after day, staring into the same shadowy corner, waiting. For what we never knew. I wish I had an answer, something logical to make sense of it all. I've tried convincing myself it was his illness, a delusion, a hallucination, a side effect. But the look in his eyes that night still haunts me. The intensity, the fear, the certainty. He's standing right behind you. Sometimes I wonder, maybe there are things we're simply not meant to understand. Maybe in the quiet corners of our minds or of these hospitals, we glimpse things others can't see. Maybe Jacob wasn't the only one who saw whatever it was. Hospitals are strange places. They carry so much. Life, death, grief, healing, hope and horror all trapped under a single roof. We see more in a week than some people see in a lifetime. Pain, triumph, recovery. But every now and then, something happens that stops even the most seasoned nurse cold. I never used to be that kind of nurse. The kind that gets spooked by flickering lights or hesitates at a door. But room 312 changed that. Room 312 had technically been empty for weeks. At least, that's what we told ourselves. But it never felt empty. Not really. It started subtly. The lights by that door would flicker now and then, nothing major. Just small, almost imperceptible dimming, like a warning to stay away. Then they'd blink back to normal before you could say anything. You told yourself it was faulty wiring, a glitch, until it happened again. And again, and again. The flickers weren't random anymore. They happened only when someone stood in front of the door. Then came the call bell. There were patients down that hallway, but not in room 312. That bed had been empty ever since the last patient passed away weeks ago. A peaceful death, nothing dramatic or strange. But the bell, it would ring at odd times, always when the halls were quiet, always when no one was around to hear it. But the night staff, that insistent, repetitive ringing, like someone trapped on the other side, trying desperately to get your attention. And every time someone would rush in to check, The room was empty. The bell would stop the moment the door creaked open. At first, the newer nurses thought it was a prank. Lori, one of our kind-hearted but easily spooked rookies, was the first to go in after one of the late-night rings. She believed someone had accidentally triggered the bell. Maybe housekeeping had left it on. Something mundane. But when she stepped through the doorway, the lights flickered. Not a soft blink, but a long, deliberate strobe, like the room was watching her. She told me later. It was like someone was standing there, waiting, watching. Lori never entered that room again, and she wasn't the only one. One by one, other nurses began to notice odd things. A chair that had been tucked into the corner of the room suddenly pulled back, like someone had just stood up, a book left untouched for days, open to a new page in the morning, as though someone had been reading it. Little things, too small to raise alarms on their own, easy to explain away, but always in room 312, always the same pattern. I brushed it off for as long as I could. I told myself it was grief, stress, sleep deprivation, until the night it happened to me. It was around 2 a.m. I was doing my rounds, half exhausted and just hoping to make it through the shift. I'd passed room 312 like I always did, just another door, nothing unusual. But that night, the door was open slightly, just enough to make me stop. The lights flickered, just a subtle twitch. Nothing dramatic, but my gut twisted. I told myself to keep walking. But then the bell rang. Soft, low, just once, like someone calling for help. My instincts kicked in. Check on the patients nearby, make sure everything's okay. But instead, I stood there, frozen, unable to move. And for the first time, I wasn't just spooked. I was afraid. There was something about the sound. Something in the way the call bell rang. That made me hesitate. It wasn't just a noise this time. It felt intentional. Who could be in there? Room 312 had been empty for weeks. But something pulled at me. I had to find out. I had no choice. I stepped toward the door, slowly, cautiously. The hallway light flickered again, catching my eye, just for a second, but enough for me to think I saw something move. A shadow, maybe, just a flicker. But it made my heart pound like a drum in my ears. I reached the door and pushed it open. The room was empty, completely empty, but the air felt wrong, heavy, like it had soaked up something it wasn't supposed to. The call bell had stopped, but not because the request was resolved, because something was waiting. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. I scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. That's when I noticed it. A small object on the floor. A medication bottle. One that had been sitting perfectly placed on the bedside table just hours before. Now it had rolled several feet across the room. I bent down and picked it up, my mind racing. No one had been in here. No one was scheduled to enter. I would have known if someone had. I straightened up and scanned the room again. The chair was still in the corner, untouched. The bed, technically in use for weeks, felt warm, not visually disturbed, not wrinkled, but there was something about it, like someone had just been there, as if someone had just stood up moments before I entered. I turned and glanced over my shoulder. Something deep in my gut told me to leave, run, even, but I didn't. I stayed. I'm not sure how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't feel real inside that room. The air felt thick, heavier than the hallway, like it was pressing against my chest, urging me to see. Then, as if on cue, the bell rang again. I spun around. Nothing had changed. The room looked exactly as it had the moment before. Still, silent, but something felt present. I can't explain what made me stay that night. I didn't expect to find anything, but I felt it. I wasn't alone. Something was there with me. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to walk past room 312. I stayed close to the nurse's station. Lori was there, too. We didn't say anything for a while. We both just sat, staring blankly at the computer screens, trying to pretend nothing had happened. After a long, heavy silence, she finally whispered, "Did you hear it last night?" I nodded. I didn't have the words to say anything more. The bell, the stillness, That feeling of being watched. We had both felt it. From that moment on, we made a quiet pact between us. An unspoken agreement burned into our routines. No one goes into room 312 alone, ever again. But the strange things didn't stop. The flickering lights. The objects that moved on their own. That damn bell ringing at random hours. None of us talked about it anymore. None of us admitted we were afraid. We didn't want to understand what was happening in that room. We were nurses. Practical. Logical. Grounded. We dealt with death and illness every day. But whatever had been left behind in room 312, it wasn't medical. And it wasn't gone. Even now, sometimes in the late hours of night, when the halls fall quiet and the air is thick and still, the bell rings again. Just once. Clear. Insistent. Like someone's still there. Still waiting. Still trapped in that room. Maybe room 312 was never really empty. Hospitals are places of transformation. Some people leave healed. Others forever changed. But we, the ones who work inside those walls, learn to expect the unexpected. Still, no amount of experience prepared me for what happened next. For him, it began slowly, quietly, unremarkably. I'd been working back-to-back shifts like usual. Exhaustion had become a second skin. But something about one patient made the shift feel different. His name was Thomas, a young man, maybe in his late 20s. He'd been admitted for severe anxiety and hallucinations. Withdrawn, quiet, always sitting by the window, eyes locked on something far outside, like he was waiting for the world to give him permission to rejoin it. He rarely spoke, barely moved. He wasn't dangerous, just broken, delicate in a way you didn't want to touch too harshly. I hadn't paid him much attention at first, just another patient in the rotation. But over time, something began to shift. Every time I went into his room, something small would be different. A new mark, a new detail, a faint trace of something left behind. It started with the wall, just a smudge at first, a barely noticeable scribble in the far corner. I assumed it was nothing. Maybe he'd scratched it accidentally or leaned too hard against the wall. But the next day it was back, the same spot. Only this time it looked like writing. Tiny rush letters, written as if in a panic, where no one would notice. I leaned in, squinting to read them. It was my name, Grace. Just that, scrawled in black ink, as if someone had whispered it to the wall in pen. I said nothing. Maybe it was part of his delusion, a harmless fixation. But then it happened again. The day after that, the scribble had grown, bolder now. Grace, in large, jagged letters, stretched across the wall like a scream. The writing was uneven, frantic, urgent, like someone had needed me to see it, needed me to listen. I stood there, staring at the wall, heart pounding. How did he even know my name? He barely spoke to anyone. And still, he wrote me. Thomas was sitting by the window again, staring out like he always did, his expression blank, unmoving, completely disconnected from the room around him. He didn't even glance at the wall. That's what baffled me. If he wasn't looking at it, if he hadn't even moved from that chair, how could he have written my name? How did he even know my name? Thomas. I called gently, stepping closer to the bed. He turned his head, slowly, deliberately, until our eyes met. Those dark, glassy eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. There was something behind them, something distant yet intense, something not quite human. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I watched him, my hand frozen, halfway in my pocket. I swallowed hard. Why are you writing my name on the wall? I tried to sound calm, steady, but even I could hear the tremble in my voice. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he smiled, a strange, eerie smile that never reached his eyes. It felt like a performance, like he was pretending to be something he wasn't. And then, in a soft, almost reverent voice, he whispered, "You'll see soon enough." Those 4 words chilled me to my bones. I didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he said them. Too calm, too certain. Maybe it was the look in his eyes. I told myself I was just tired, maybe overthinking it. I'd heard patients say bizarre things before, But something about Thomas's voice lingered. It clawed at the back of my mind long after I left his room that day. The next few shifts passed by like fog. I kept checking in on Thomas, unsure what to make of him, still waiting for the pieces to add up. But the wall, the scribbles kept appearing. It wasn't just my name anymore. There were symbols now, words, scratches in the paint, messages that seemed to shift day to day. Some were incomprehensible, scattered letters, strange numbers, but some felt pointed, too specific, like they were meant just for me. I told myself not to obsess. It was probably just a symptom of his condition, but I couldn't shake it. It felt like a puzzle, and I had to figure it out. Then came the night that changed everything. It had been a long shift. I was exhausted, just trying to finish rounds. But something told me to stop by Thomas's room one more time. When I stepped inside, I immediately knew something was wrong. The wall looked different. The scribbles weren't random this time. They weren't my name either. They were clear, blunt, "You'll be next," written in thick, erratic strokes, so fast the ink had smeared, like someone had been desperate to get the message out. I froze in the doorway. My breath caught. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Thomas sat in the same position, by the window, back turned. But the room, it felt colder than usual. Too cold. The lights flickered. Once, then again, and then Thomas turned toward me. Slowly, deliberately. His face was blank, no emotion, no expression. But his eyes were wide. Too wide. That same smile spread across his face again. Thin, stretched, unnatural. "Why?" I asked, barely able to form a word. "Why are you doing this?" His answer came in a whisper, so low I barely heard it. "You'll see soon enough." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. His voice looped in my head again and again, like a countdown I didn't understand. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a psychotic episode. Maybe it was the medication. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Something else was happening. The next morning, I returned to the hospital with a knot in my stomach. Everything felt different. The hallway outside his room was quiet. Too quiet. The air was thick, almost suffocating. Each step toward the door felt heavier than the last. I paused, hand hovering above the doorknob. I wasn't sure I was ready. Finally, I pushed the door open. Thomas was gone. The bed was made. The chair empty. The room silent. But that wasn't what made me stop cold. It was the wall. The scribbles, everything, had vanished, erased like they'd never existed. In their place, in perfect, deliberate handwriting, was a single sentence. "Grace, your turn." I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My name, my turn. I stood there, staring, unsure how long I'd been frozen in place. The air felt heavy again, like it was pressing against my chest, like I wasn't alone. I backed out of the room slowly, my footsteps muffled by the thick stillness around me. And for the first time since I'd begun this job, I felt the full weight of the hospital bear down on me. The hallway stretched endlessly. Every light above me buzzed faintly. The air felt like it clung to my skin. I don't know what happened to Thomas. I don't know what he saw or what he meant, but I can't shake the feeling that something is following me now, that whatever he was warning me about hasn't finished yet. I keep asking myself, was it a warning or was it an invitation? All I know is that I'll never forget the way he looked at me, never forget that smile or those words that still haunt my every step. "You'll see soon enough."